Okay, hey, this is a video where I'll show you how to use Crocotile 3D. When you open the program, you get a window that shows the 3D view over here. You have a tile set window that shows you a tile set, the default tile set, and you can click on them to choose your tile. I also have a program that shows my key presses so that you'll be able to follow along and see what I'm actually doing on my keyboard, since using the keyboard is pretty important with this program. And it also shows the mouse buttons over here as well. Okay, so as I click, say I click spacebar, that'll highlight. If I click spacebar and hold it down and use the left mouse button, that'll rotate the scene. Okay, and you see the button over there being highlighted. So if you're a bit confused, you could look at this and see what exactly is happening. Now, let's go through some of the basic controls. You hold spacebar and left click to rotate the scene. You hold spacebar right click to move and drag and it pans it, or the middle button and spacebar to zoom in and zoom out. Okay, so those are basic ways to maneuver the scene. You could also click the Crocotile character and drag it to rotate around. You could also move this around or right click that to hide it if you want to. Now, I haven't used this program in a long time, so there's a lot of stuff I don't remember how to do. So I also have this, the information as to how to do everything, and that comes with the program. You could also find it on crocotile3d.com, and I'll just show you. This is where it is. You click here, how to use, and then click one of these and it opens up to this page and you could read through it. So I may be using that to remind myself how to do stuff, but that'll also be interesting for you because you'll be able to see from kind of a fresh standpoint as to how to figure out how to do stuff with this program. And that's the main reason why I'm creating this video, is to show you how to get started with Crocotile 3D. Now over here you have the tile set view, and as you can see, you could select a bunch and it shows up over here what you have selected. You could just click one, and then there are two modes. There's a drawing mode and there's an editing mode to edit the tiles. And you could either click this button to switch between them, or you could hit tab key to switch between the modes. And there's other settings in the Tileset window as well, but we'll get to that as we build something. And there's also a zoom to zoom in on the tile set if you want to. So there's also painting to paint onto tiles, and also a scene tab for grouping tiles together into objects and organizing things a little bit. So let's say you want to create a new tile set. You don't want to use this default one. Well, the easiest way to do that is to just select all of this and go to paint mode. And there's another way to do it, but you could just well see, some things are kind of technical. Like you could add a tile set, you could replace this tile set with one if you already have one saved somewhere. You could remove it, but I don't think you could remove the last tile set. You have to have at least one. You can combine tile sets, like if you have a duplicate and you want to combine them, you could resize it or you could export it. Okay, so and then these buttons kind of switch between your tile sets. Anyways, since I don't have a tile set that I could add, I'll just select all of this and then I'll select all of this, I'll hold the control key to select the tiles, and then control again to click and drag, and then I'll just hit the delete key to delete that, and then I can just fill it in with a solid color. I know that's kind of it's not really straightforward, but it shows you that there's a lot of tools that you could use to do stuff. You know, you could select tiles and or just select things in general, and then draw inside your selection as well, and you could zoom in and hold spacebar to scroll. Like if you want to zoom in this much, you could scroll around and draw, create your tile set here. And then if you go back over to the Tileset tab, you could click one of your tiles that you've drawn, and then you'll be able to place it into the scene. Okay, so if you place it like that, you're just using the left mouse button to draw them while you're in the draw mode, and you could right click on them and drag to erase like that. Now that's kind of cool, right? So if you want to place them in a different angle, because right now it's just one angle, what you can do is hold spacebar, rotate the scene, and what this does is basically allows you to place the tiles the way that you're facing relative to this crosshair, this 3D crosshair over here. So if you rotate this way, it'll draw in this direction, and if you rotate so that you're looking down, it'll draw the tiles in this direction. Okay, so that's a quick way to kind of draw tiles in different directions. Okay, now you also notice that they face only one direction. When you rotate behind them, you can't see them. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. Now I don't want all these tiles here, so instead of erasing them, I could just undo what I did by holding Control and Z, and that'll get rid of everything that I've done. Okay, so there's a history that you could go through with Control Z, and then Control Y will redo everything. So that's pretty simple. Now if you want even more control to like move and position stuff, you start using the WASD keys, and what those keys will do is they'll move this 3D crosshair. As you can see, there's an origin point represented by the green, red, and blue lines. Those are at coordinate 0, 0, 0. And as you press WASD, it'll move the 3D crosshair through the 3D space. Now it's only moving at 1 pixel at a time, but you could change that over here. Is it this one? This is grid rounding, and then you have tile splitting. So I believe it's the grid rounding that allows you to position at greater distances. So if we set it to 0 and we go over here, you can see now this thing is moving much more at a time. Okay, now as you can see, I'm pressing A to move left and D to move right, W to go up, S to go down, and this is relative to the way the camera's facing. So if you rotate the camera this way and press A, it'll move left, D move right, W, A, S down. Same way if you're looking downwards, and do the same thing. Or if you rotate this way, if I press W, it'll move up or down relative to the way that you're facing. Okay, so the way you're facing is pretty important when you are using this program. Okay, now let's say you don't want to move left, right, up, or down. You want to move forward or backwards. To do that, you hold spacebar and press W or S. So I'm holding spacebar and pressing W, and now the crosshair is moving away from me. If I press spacebar and S, it'll move towards me. So that's another way. So now you have full range of movement by just holding spacebar or the WASD keys, combination of the spacebar and the WAS and D keys. Okay, pretty simple. Now, let's say you don't like using those keys. I should just mention that there's a settings up here, and if you go to buttons, you can remap a lot of the buttons and things like that. Okay, there's a lot of way to customize how to move things, like move selection forward. If you click this, it shows space plus W, and that's key binding, and you can change that to whatever you want. Okay, now and then you could save it and load your key settings and things like that. Okay, so there's that customizability to it. So let's go on and let's see, show you how to, what should I show you next? Oh, there's also other settings. You can set resolution, window size, and other things. You could show a ruler. If you have the ruler selected, this shows you it's kind of the spacing of things. You could show the crosshair arrows when you're editing things. So I think by default they're enabled. So, and there's also an object mode constraint, but all of this stuff is explained in here, and there's quite a lot to go through, so I'm not sure if I'll cover everything in this video. I only have a limited amount of time. I might make some more videos after this, but say I draw a tile like there, right there, and then I could, as you can see, the crosshair isn't aligned to the vertices because when you're placing tiles, they're spaced to the origin point, not the crosshair. And in a future version, maybe I could add some way to customize that. But if I go into edit mode by pressing tab or hitting that button over there, you can see the vertices start to show up, and here are the arrows that I could use. If I click on the tile, it selects it, or I could click the vertex and it causes the crosshair to jump to that vertex. So that's one way to position the crosshair if you don't want it where it was before. Now, as you can see, as I'm selecting them, they're becoming selected, and if I click them again, they become unselected. And while they're selected, I could now use the, since I'm in edit mode, I can use the WASD keys to move the 3D crosshair, and that'll basically move everything that's selected along with the 3D crosshair, whichever way you want to move it. Okay, and it'll move it based on the grid rounding value that you have here. So if I go down to 4 and over here, it'll now move it more finely. So you can move it pixel by pixel or whatever amount that you want based on the grid rounding value. Okay, so that's cool, but you could also reposition the crosshair without moving the selected stuff, and to do that you hold shift. So if I hold shift and use WASD, that moves the crosshair without moving any of the selection. I could hold spacebar as well as holding shift to move it forward and back without moving anything. But if I let go of shift, it now moves, okay? And the movement can be undone as well, or redone. Okay, so if I click the face of the tile so that the face is selected, then it just moves the entire tile regardless of which vertices are being selected. Okay, and then I could hold Control D to deselect the vertices, and then Control D again to deselect all the faces. Okay, I could also press Control A to select all the faces, and Control A again to select all the vertices. Okay. Control D, deselect the vertices. Control D again to deselect the faces. So that's kind of useful if you just want to select or deselect everything. Now, let's say we have more than one tile. Well, let's go back into the draw mode and draw another tile. Let's say we want it kind of like a box, okay? So we'll do this and this. Now, as you can see, it's not positioning in the right spot because of the way that the tiles align to the origin point. In a future version, I might be able to change that. But for now, to get around that, you could just click it and then go into edit mode, select it, and then move it back to wherever you want it to go. I know that's a little technical, but it's pretty simple process once you get used to how things work. Okay. Now, as you can see, the tiles are sharing a lot of the vertices. So if I click this one, it'll click all the vertices, and now I can move them all together. Okay. And I can deselect it. Control D, Control A selects all the faces. Control A again selects everything. So that's kind of cool. Now, there's a way to Control A, that selects all of them. Control A again will select ones that they're touching as well, I think. Yeah, okay. See that? So deselect the vertices. If I deselect everything, now watch. I'll deselect everything. Now I click one of the tiles. Okay, I have one selected. Now I hold Control and then press A. That'll select all of the vertices of whatever's selected. Okay. Now I can move it irrespective of the other tiles. Now if I hold Control and press A again, it'll select all the vertices that are touching other vertices that are selected. Okay, so I hit that. Now they're all selected. So that's kind of interesting. That'll probably be useful in some cases. Okay, and if I want to do it with another tile, I can just select that tile, hit Control A. It'll select all the tiles except for it'll select all the vertices of whatever's selected. Now I hit Control A again. It'll select all the vertices that are touching other vertices that are selected. See how useful that is? It's just a little it's a little technical, but it's a simple process once you understand what's happening. And then you can just deselect everything if you want. And that's just a little finer control as to how to move and things around and select stuff. And also, you may notice there's these arrows here. Generally, I don't like to use the arrows because it requires precision with your mouse clicks and that sort of thing. I much rather use the keyboard, but if you want, you could use these arrows to select and drag. See, I'm using the mouse to position stuff based on the direction, and when they're yellow, that means you could drag it. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Okay, But generally I keep that off because sometimes it just gets in the way. And I feel it's easier just to use the keyboard. So, as you can see, when you select a tile over here, it also gets selected in the Tileset window, so you can see which tiles correspond to tiles in the Tileset and in the scene as well. And then you could also see the UV gets highlighted. And the UV is basically how it maps the graphic onto the polygons, the triangles. So you could right click the UV and drag them around here to like edit how it looks, how it gets mapped, as you can see. And Control Z undoes that, and Control Y redoes it. You can also select the vertices, and I believe we could position them over here. I wonder, do I right click? Oh, you could right click and drag and like what's the word? Swap them with other tiles. Wherever you drag it to, it swaps it with that tile. So that's if you want to like reorganize your tile set. You could like swap where they're positioned. And so now this tile is over here, and it still uses the same UV mapping because it moves the pixel graphic data and also the UV data. And I could move it back over there, and it still looks good. Okay, so I'm showing you all these ways to work with your tile set and the 3D tiles. I know I haven't really built much yet, but the point here is to kind of show you how to use the program, how to do certain things that'll allow you to build stuff. Okay, and yeah, so I'm pretty sure the way to position them. Let me look in here. Yeah, tile set window. See, there's a lot of information on this page. See, I just showed you how to do tile swapping. And it tells you how to draw and stuff like that. Anyways, let's continue on. Okay, something else that's interesting is if you select a face, you could right click in the 3D scene and you get a bunch of ways of editing things. Like you could select all like we did before. It shows you the shortcut, or deselect. So this is another way of editing things. You could rotate stuff, which I haven't shown you yet, and there's shortcut keys for that. But if you go into faces, there's a split and subdivide, but let's see here. You have to press enter first if you want. I think it's enter. Oh, it's a middle mouse button. Okay, you press middle mouse button after things are selected, and then it allows you to split tiles. So the yellow line is where it will split. So if I want to split in the middle, and also down here you have a setting here that you could change if you want it to position every 4 pixels. But for now I'll just leave it as 1 since it gives you more finer control. So if I go into the middle and right click, I could go to faces, and then split. And there's also subdivide, but that's if you want to like split it evenly like a grid. But I'll just do split. And what you can see is it now has vertices here and down there, and it basically split the tile into 2 tiles. And then I hit middle mouse button to get out of that mode, and those faces are selected, and now I have 2 tiles. But you can see the UV coordinate over here for each tile is appropriate to so that it displays the graphic, the tiles how it was before. So that's just another way to edit things. And there's a reason why that's useful, but since we're just showing how to use stuff, I figure I showed you how to do that. Okay, so what else is there? I don't think there's a way to merge anything that's on the to-do list. But let's say you hit middle mouse button. I think what that does is it forces you to wait a minute. I don't know. Forget that. I'm trying to remember how to use some stuff. Okay. One thing is you could create an object out of all of this, and also notice how I'm selecting. You can select multiple vertices by clicking and dragging the mouse. If you hold Alt and left click and drag, it deselects them. Okay. And also up here there's a button, the select mode, so that you only select what's visible, or you could also click it and select what's not visible. So if that's in that mode, when you select all the vertices like that, it'll also select. Oh, I thought there was a vertex behind it. I was thinking this was a cube. Okay, let's deselect that, and let's rotate it like this. So some vertices are hidden behind there. If I select it like this, those other vertices should be selected. Yeah, okay. Now let's just deselect them, and let's change this mode up here so that it's just the front selecting mode. And if I hide those vertices and look this direction, if I select everything, those other vertices shouldn't be selected. See? So that's useful if you don't want to select things that are behind other stuff. If you only want to just select whatever's visible. And generally I like to leave it in this mode, just so that you're not accidentally selecting stuff in the distance or behind things. Okay? Okay, so there's also if you hold spacebar, you can click this to like quickly rotate in different directions. But you could also rotate things around the crosshair. Like if I have those selected, and notice how the crosshair is positioned right there. If I hit Q, it'll rotate it that direction. If I hit E, it'll rotate it the other direction. So you could use those keys to quickly rotate stuff around the crosshair. And you could undo and redo that if you want. So I could say look this direction and then rotate it. Oh, yeah, I wouldn't rotate anywhere because it's aligned to the crosshair. So I can move the crosshair over here and then hit Q and it'll rotate it around it. See how it's doing that? Or E will rotate it the other way. If I rotate this, it'll do the same thing. So yeah, that's just another way to kind of adjust things. Like if you want to select everything like that, then you can just rotate everything around the crosshair. And if you hold Shift and E, it does it that direction. So there's just, you know, different ways of controlling the vertices and faces or editing them. Well, and you have to be in edit mode. Like if I jump back to draw mode, if I use Q and E, it'll rotate the tile. So that's one thing I didn't show you how to do yet, is how to rotate tiles. Like if you don't want it facing this direction, you could rotate it using Q and E. And then, like, you know, rotate it a different direction. You could redraw over it or erase it. Now, the thing about erasing is you have to align the crosshair onto the tile. See, if I'm right clicking on those tiles, it won't erase them because the crosshair isn't on top of it. You have to have your crosshair somewhere in the same plane, and then you could erase. Okay, and that just prevents you from accidentally erasing other tiles. Normally when you erase stuff, it's usually after you've drawn something. Then you could just, it's like, oh, I don't want it there, I'll erase those instead. Since the crosshair is already there, they'll erase. But if you draw something and then move the crosshair, they won't erase, because it's only erasing where this tile that you're moving around is. So you have to basically put the tile back onto it in the same plane and then erase it like that. Okay. Okay, so what else is there? Now, as you can see, we have stuff selected over here. I'll go into edit mode and select this tile, and then I see it's there. I could select the tile here and then go into painting mode, and now I have that tile selected. Like if I select something else, another tile, and then go back into painting mode, that tile is selected or shown. So I select the tile that I want to paint on, and then I have different tools and things. Oh, that was the eyedrop tool. And I believe there's different shortcuts as well to select the tool. So E will use the eraser. B, wait a second, why isn't that? Oh, it's because I have a selection selected. I forgot about that. So, as you can see, you might it's good that I'm showing you this, because you might wonder why stuff isn't going as you planned, but there's reasons for it. Now, you can only draw inside the selection, and since there was a selection that I made before, I have to get rid of that selection. So I just hit backspace and it'll get rid of it. I don't think that deletes stuff, but anyways, you could have just maybe clicked elsewhere. Control and plus and control and minus zoom in and out. Yeah, I have to have the selection tool to deselect it. Like if I was on the pencil tool and I was trying to draw outside it and it wouldn't let me, so I had to be I had to draw inside it. As you can see, as I'm drawing, it's getting updated in the 3D view as well. And Control D will deselect that selection as well. And there's also a Lasso Tool if you want more finer selection. And you could resize it and move the selection around. And then it's kind of like Photoshop tools basically. It has the same key presses, shortcut keys. So if I hold Control, I could cut that section. If I hold minus, I could remove a section of it, like subtract a section of the selection by selecting something else. Or I could hold Shift and add more to the selection. Okay. Or I could hold Shift and Alt and select a bit of it, and that'll just select a bit of the selection that I selected, if that makes sense. But then if I cut it, it'll cut it out. As you can see, that piece disappears, but I still have it selected over here. And I could, after it's cut out, I could like resize it like this with the little handles in the corners. And I could also do it the other way like that. I don't believe there's any rotating though. And then I just click outside of the selection and it'll paste it there. And as you can see, it's updated. And then you can also undo that. Control Z undoes those things. Or Control Y redos it. Okay, so that's a little bit more. There's a magic wand that you could select different pieces. And there's a contiguous selection so that you could select just one piece, or if it's unselected, it'll select all those pieces. See? So that's useful as well. So and then what else is there? There's a fill tool. I want to fill that, and there's also a contiguous option for that as well. I just want to select one of them, or you could refill all the colors like that. So that's pretty useful, isn't it? But if you don't want to do everything, if you don't want to paint everything in this program, also down here, well, there's an RGB or HSL switch between those if you want. But also, I'm getting distracted, but there's also a secondary color. X flips between them. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, you could import your tile set, and then refresh the tile set. If you've imported it and then edited it outside of the program, you could hit this button to refresh it. But since we're just doing everything in the program, that doesn't matter. Now there's also the scene tab. Now you can turn a group of tiles into an object. So let's select the tiles that we want to group together. Let's hold Shift and select, and that'll select the faces. I don't think I told you that yet. But holding Shift and selecting selects the faces. Holding Shift and Alt deselects the faces. So you could have like vertices and hold Shift and Alt and it'll deselect just the faces and keep the vertices selected. So select the vertices that you want to group together, like so. I don't want to group this other one together, although I could. Now I could right click and create an object. Yeah, let's do that. So now it created an object out of those selected tiles. And you can see in the scene tab, it shows up here. This is our object. We could hide it by clicking the eye icon. As you can see, it's visible or disappears when we toggle between that. We could also rename it by double clicking it and just say like I don't know, So that's the name of it. And we could also create folders. Oops. We could import them. So we could save this. If we right click this, we could export the object to a prefab, and then we could re-import them. Okay. But we could add a layer which acts kind of like a folder, and then we can click and drag it just to kind of organize stuff. This is my stuff layer, stuff folder, whatever. And then so we could right click and select all. It'll select all those objects in the scene. But if we go into draw mode, you can see we have this object that we could draw into the scene now. But notice how it isn't where my mouse is placed, and that's because the origin point is where the crosshair was, okay, when we created the object. So to fix that, you could have just created the object, but first reposition the crosshair you want the origin point to be for the object, or you could just edit it. If I right click this selected object, see, I could now when I click it, it'll select all the tiles for the object. So if I click it and right click and edit the object, now I could edit only the tiles within that object. Okay, you can't edit anything else. But it'll also allow you to reposition the origin point. If you go down here and click that and go origin, it'll show you where the origin point is over here. You can see this little floating dot triangle. That's where the origin point, that's where this point is. And you could add other points as well. And then you could export that data, like if you need it for like a game or something like that. So let's say I want the origin point right there. Now I just go over here, make sure the point is selected, and then move point to crosshair, and that'll reposition the origin point. So now I could also add other points, like if I want, if you don't develop games, you probably won't understand why this is important, but you could add other points. Let's say there, I want another point. So now we have a origin point and we have another point, and then we could rename this point something like that. And then you could export that data, export instance data, I think it is, and then use that in your game development when you spawn those objects or whatever. But anyways, when you go into draw mode, now that object is, hold on a second, I have to exit we're still editing the object, so I think I could just hit enter. Yeah, enter exits the object that you're editing. So now you could edit everything again except for the object. In order to edit objects, you have to enter that object edit mode by selecting it and edit object. Okay, so if we go into draw mode, you could see now it's positioned a little bit better. Okay, and I could just click them like that and draw a bunch of them. Okay, so if you make like a tree, you could create an object out of the tree and then draw a bunch of trees that way. And the usefulness of that is if you go back into edit mode, you could click these and move them as a group, or you could edit one of them, like right click edit, and then the changes you make to one get applied to all of them. Isn't that useful? So that's kind of why you would group things into objects. If you want basically the same thing repeated in the scene, okay? So let's say I wanted that like that. Then I just hit enter, and now it's like that. Control Shift D deselects objects. Okay, so let's say if you want to go back to just drawing tiles, you go to the tile set and click the tile that you want to draw, and that'll start drawing the tiles. If you want to go to the scene and draw an object, you click on the object that you want to draw and it changes to the object. Okay? So now, so we have objects and tiles in the scene. So I could select, let's say we have it like that, okay? Now I can move stuff around, and I could rotate things, and yeah, I could deselect the vertices and the faces, but that doesn't deselect the objects. To deselect objects, you hit Control Shift and D, or Control Shift A will select all the objects. Control Shift D deselects them. So you could have other stuff selected and select the objects or deselect the objects irrespective of the tiles that are selected. So you know, it's a little technical, but it's a simple thing, simple way of managing whatever you want to manage, I guess. And it just allows you to edit stuff a little quicker. So what else is there to show? You can mirror stuff. If I mirror it, it like flips it over to the other side across the axes. But as you notice, they're facing the other direction. To fix that, you can reverse the face, which is Control R, or you can just click this, and that'll reverse the face. So now they're facing the other direction. And so to mirror it is R and flip is F. So R would mirror it back, but since the faces are reversed, what was it? Control R. Okay, so Control R flips the faces. Okay. Now there's also a flip, which flips it across the other axes, and then Control or Shift R, yeah, will reverse it. So it depends like which direction your camera is facing, okay? So that's kind of cool. And now what else is there? There's you can flip the edge as well, and what the edge is basically this line that divides the tile into two triangles. So you see there's a line here. Let's say you don't like the way that it triangulates. How do I explain that better? If I move this like so, it's kind of weird on this triangle. It gets like really bent. You can see it gets bent like that. And that's because this edge, and this triangle edge, is connected between this vertex and this other vertex. Now, if I flip the edge, which is Control F, or I can just click this, it'll flip that. It'll change it to the other vertices. So now it triangulates itself in a different way. So that allows you to adjust the way the tiles triangulate and kind of allows you to shape things a little better. Okay. And if you have multiple ones selected, you can hit Control F. Is it Control F? Maybe I have only one selected. Or maybe it's because I have a vertice selected. Oh, it's Shift F. Okay, so that should be Shift. It shouldn't be Control. So that's inaccurate. It's Shift F, not Control. Okay, so I'll have to fix that. So Shift R reverses and Shift F changes the edge, the way it triangulates. As you can see, Shift, I'm holding Shift. And that changes. Okay? So, yeah, pretty useful ways of editing things. So there's also an orthographic mode. And you could edit stuff in this mode in the same way that you would do it in the perspective mode. And you could add a skybox, and there's other settings which I've already shown you. There's a file that you could export stuff, but you have to purchase Crocotile 3D first. You could save as long as it's under 100 tiles on the free version, but if you want to save more tiles than that, then you just purchase it basically. And to do that, you just go to Crocotile 3D, and down here you just put your name and email address, and you pay through PayPal. It'll go to a PayPal page, and you just pay $10. That's all. So I think for this video, I've shown you a lot of ways to edit things, move the camera around and position stuff. There's a UV tile size. I'll just quickly go over a few other things. If you change this UV tile size to say 32, then the selection that you select is bigger, but it still is the same tile size in the 3D view, which that's another thing I might implement in the future, is the ability to change the default tile size in the 3D view. But so like if you have a tile set with different tile size, you just set the UV tile size to whatever tile size the tile set uses. And then UV precision, that's if you're editing the UVs here, you could set this to say 8 by 8, and then when you right click and drag, it'll move it based on that. Oh, I remembered how to position the UVs. You just use the arrow keys over here. Just use the arrow keys, and that'll position it whichever vertices you have selected. So if I select this vertice with the tile selected, if I use the arrow keys, it'll position that vertice. As you can see, it's kind of rotated, so yeah. And then so like you could set the UV precision to 1 by 1 to get finer control, and then move it 1 pixel by 1 pixel. So if I want to move, I forget which one it is, that one, because it was a little weird. I can move it like that. It's also moving the other tile. That's strange. So you gotta be sure you have the things selected that you want to move around. So for example, it's moving that one and I don't want it to move. I could just deselect this face, and if I move it, you see it's moving the other one. I think you just deselect that and then move it out of the way, select that vertice, move it back. There might be another way to do it, but that's just a quick way to fix that, so that you just edit one vertice instead of ones that are overlapping. I know there's just a lot of quirks to things, but when you realize what's happening, then it's pretty simple to use. And there's a UV padding, which is I can't remember what that's for. I think that's when you export it. But whatever. I generally don't use UV padding, so I just keep it 0, 0. What else can I show you? You could resize the tile set, and it gives you, the direction you want to resize it from, like from this corner, from center, and then how many tiles you want to resize it. Or you could change it to the pixels or percentage. You keep it proportional or unproportional. So say I want it 10 by 10. You could just adjust the canvas, which will kind of crop it, or you could adjust the whole image, and which will resample it or resize it and kind of squish it. Generally I keep it on canvas since I don't want my work to get adjusted. So I'll just apply that, and now you see there's less tiles in the scene. So I'm zooming in now, Control minus and plus, pretty simple way to zoom. And when it's zoomed in, you hold spacebar and you could pan around. Right click to reposition stuff. So yeah, there's pretty useful. I can make it bigger. Apply. Now it's bigger. That's another way to clear everything. Just resize it one by one and then resize it bigger, and it'll all be just one color. If you want to easily get rid of the default tile set, just resize it and it'll clear the pixels. But I could also undo that, so that's good. In case you make a mistake, you can just undo everything, Control Z or Control Y. And I believe there's a number of history steps somewhere. Undo limit is 15, so you can only undo 15 times, but you could edit this and make it bigger if you want. It just might take up more resources or whatever. And yeah, generally I keep it low and just kind of make sure what I do is what I want, and then also keep up backups, save things often, maybe multiple versions. And you can also export to OBJ export it as just a Crocotile 3D scene file, and that you could just save as scene. What is this? I don't know. Save as, and then you can reload it. What else is there? Oh, you could export just objects. If you want just one object type to export, but export all of them, you could do that. You can merge the vertices and things like that, those settings. You could also just export the scene and export the scene without objects, exclude the objects or include them. So it would just export the tiles without the objects, unless you want the objects included. Or if you just want to export one object, you just export the object like that, just by itself as a prefab, so you could load it in again to another scene, or as an OBJ file to load into some other program. And there's other experimental stuff. So I believe that covers most of the basic stuff, I think. What do those keys do? Oh yeah, these keys, the bracket keys, allow you to change the grid setting quickly while you're editing stuff. And yeah, you can look through the how to use to figure out how to do other stuff. But maybe I'll make some more videos in the future, just kind of going over more stuff or actually building things. But hopefully this is a good starter for people to start playing with Crocotile 3D. You can get it for free and just mess around with it, see if you like it, and if it works for you, then you could get the full version and start exporting stuff for your games and things like that. It's pretty simple.